She poured him coffee without recognizing the man behind the dirt and scars, the man who once held her hand at prom, the one who disappeared into war and never wrote back. For 7 days, he tested her love without telling her who he was. But when she defended him, this homeless stranger, against the town's cruelty, he knew she had passed. The only problem? He might have already failed her. If you believe love should never be tested but always trusted, type forgiveness below, like the video, and subscribe for more stories that hit where it hurts and heals. The bus wheezed to a stop at the corner of Maple and 3rd, exhaust fumes mixing with the crisp October air of Cedar Falls. A figure emerged from the back seat, hunched shoulders wrapped in a torn military jacket 3 sizes too big. His face was hidden beneath a wool cap pulled low, dirty jeans hung loose on his frame, and his boots were scuffed beyond recognition. To anyone watching, he looked like another drifter passing through their small Iowa town. But Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen wasn't a drifter. He was home. 3 tours in Afghanistan had changed him in ways that couldn't be seen from the outside. The Purple Heart in his duffel bag told part of the story. The nightmares told another. But the real test wasn't about what war had taken from him. It was about what remained. And that test was about to begin, because across the street, through the window of Miller's Diner, sat the woman he'd loved since high school. Sarah Mitchell hadn't changed much. Same auburn hair, same gentle smile as she served coffee to the morning regulars. She moved with the same grace that had made him stumble over his words at 17. What would she see when she looked at him now? The soldier who'd promised to return, or just another broken man asking for spare change? Marcus had been planning this moment for weeks. Not the reunion he'd imagined, but the test he needed. Because if Sarah couldn't love him at his lowest, how could he trust her with his broken pieces? The bell above the diner door chimed as Marcus shuffled inside, keeping his head down, his shoulders curved inward. The familiar scent of bacon and coffee hit him like a memory he'd carried through 3 years of desert sand and mountain cold. He chose a corner booth, the same one where he'd asked Sarah to prom 12 years ago. She approached with a pot of coffee and a practiced smile, the kind servers give to strangers. "Morning, hun. What can I get you?" Marcus mumbled something about just coffee, his voice hoarse, disguised. Sarah's eyes lingered on him for a moment, and his heart hammered against his ribs. Did she recognize something? The way he held his shoulders, the scar visible above his collar? "You passing through?" she asked, filling his cup. Something like that. He risked a glance up. She was so close he could smell her vanilla perfume, the same one she'd worn to their first date. Her wedding ring finger was bare. His chest tightened with hope and fear in equal measure. "Well, you let me know if you need anything else." She turned to go, then paused. "And hun, there's a veteran support group that meets at the Methodist Church on Tuesdays. If you need someone to talk to." She'd noticed. Somehow she'd seen through the disguise to the soldier underneath, but she hadn't recognized him. The test was working, but not in the way he'd expected. Marcus sat in that booth for 2 hours, nursing his coffee and watching Sarah work. She moved between tables with easy confidence, laughing with regulars, comforting a crying child with a scraped knee. This was the woman he'd dreamed about in dusty foxholes, the face that had kept him sane when the world exploded around him. Around noon, she approached again. "You hungry? We've got leftover meatloaf from yesterday, on the house." He shook his head. "Can't afford it." "I said on the house." She set the plate down gently. "Everyone deserves a hot meal." As she walked away, Marcus noticed her co-worker, Janet, shooting disapproving looks. "Sarah, you can't feed every stray that wanders in here. Tom'll have your head." "Then Tom can fire me," Sarah replied, not lowering her voice. "That man's been sitting there for hours with 1 cup of coffee. He's not causing trouble. He's just lost." Lost. The word hit Marcus like shrapnel. She was right, but not in the way she thought. He wasn't lost geographically. He was lost emotionally, spiritually, trying to figure out who he was now that the war was over. But Sarah had seen it. Without knowing who he was, she'd seen his need and responded with kindness. Maybe this test was revealing more about her character than his fears. For 3 days, Marcus returned to the diner. Each morning, Sarah greeted him with the same gentle warmth she'd shown that first day. She never asked his name, never pushed for his story. She simply accepted his presence, refilled his coffee, and made sure he had something to eat. On the 4th day, she slid into the booth across from him during her break. "I've been thinking," she said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "You remind me of someone I used to know." Marcus's pulse quickened. "Yeah?" "A boy I loved a long time ago. He joined the army right after high school, deployed overseas." She stared out the window, her voice growing soft. "He was supposed to come home 2 years ago, but communication stopped. His family thinks he's dead." "You don't?" Sarah's smile was sad but determined. "I'd know if he was gone. I'd feel it, like a piece of me would just disappear." She looked directly at him then, and Marcus felt exposed, as if she could see through all his walls. "He promised he'd come back to me, and Marcus Chen never broke a promise." The sound of his name on her lips nearly broke him. She was talking about him to him, sharing her hope and pain with a stranger who was anything but strange. The cruelty of his test suddenly hit him full force. Word spread quickly in Cedar Falls. The homeless veteran at Miller's Diner became a topic of conversation at the hardware store, the post office, the gas station. Opinions were divided. "Sarah's too trusting," Martha Hopkins complained to anyone who'd listen. "That man could be dangerous. We don't know anything about him." But others defended Sarah's kindness. Pastor Williams from the Methodist Church stopped by to offer Marcus resources. The American Legion post commander, a Vietnam veteran named Bill Rodriguez, sat with him for an hour, sharing stories without asking questions. "War changes us," Bill told him, "but it doesn't have to break us. You got people here who understand." Marcus watched the town's reaction with growing amazement. Cedar Falls wasn't the same place he'd left. The war had touched this community too, through the families who'd sent their sons and daughters overseas. They recognized the signs of trauma, the look of someone trying to find their way back to normal. But it was Sarah who surprised him most. When customers complained about the vagrant taking up space, she defended him fiercely. "He's not causing any problems," she told Mayor Davidson when he suggested she ask Marcus to move along. "He's quiet, respectful, and he's been through enough. This is my section, and he's welcome here." On the 7th day, everything changed. Marcus was in his usual booth when 3 teenagers burst through the door, loud and aggressive. The kind of kids who thought cruelty was comedy, who saw vulnerability as an invitation for sport. "Look what we got here," the tallest one sneered, approaching Marcus's table. "Town's new pet hobo." "Leave him alone, Tyler," Sarah warned from behind the counter. But Tyler Morrison, the mayor's son, wasn't listening. He knocked Marcus's coffee cup to the floor, ceramic shattering across the linoleum. "This is a family establishment, not a shelter. Why don't you crawl back to whatever bridge you came from?" Something snapped inside Marcus. 3 years of combat training, of watching friends die, of surviving things these kids couldn't imagine. And now a spoiled teenager was trying to humiliate him. His hands clenched into fists, muscle memory taking over. But then Sarah was there, stepping between them, her voice steady but fierce. "I said leave him alone." "Or what?" Tyler laughed. "You gonna call the cops on us?" "No," Sarah said quietly. "I'm gonna tell everyone in this town exactly what kind of man you really are. How you pick on people who can't fight back. How you're nothing like the hero your grandfather was." The mention of his grandfather, a Korean War veteran, hit Tyler like a slap. His bravado crumbled, and he backed away, his friends following. After the teenagers left, Sarah knelt beside Marcus's booth, cleaning up the broken ceramic. Her hands were shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry that happened." Marcus looked down at her, this woman who'd defended him without hesitation, who'd seen past his disguise to the person underneath. The weight of his deception felt crushing. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Why what?" "Why do you care? You don't know me." Sarah sat back on her heels, studying his face. "Maybe I know you better than you think." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Marcus felt like she was seeing through all his layers, all his fears and pretenses. He reached up slowly and pulled off his wool cap, revealing the face he'd hidden for a week. Sarah's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. "Marcus?" Her voice was barely a whisper. He nodded, unable to speak. "Oh my God. Oh my God, Marcus." She was crying now, tears streaming down her cheeks. Why didn't you tell me?" They sat in the empty diner after closing, the closed sign turned outward, the outside world locked away. Marcus told her everything. The roadside bomb that had nearly killed him, the months of recovery, the nightmares that still woke him screaming. And finally, the test. "I needed to know," he said, his voice raw. "I needed to know if you could love me at my worst, if you could see past this." He gestured to his shabby clothes, his hollow cheeks, the scars that marked him. Sarah was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but hurt. "Do you really think I'm that shallow?" "No, because for 7 days I've been falling in love with a homeless veteran who reminded me of you. I've been defending him, feeding him, caring about him. And all this time, it was you, testing me." Marcus felt his heart breaking. "Sarah, you want to know what I see when I look at you?" She stood up, moving to the window. "I see the boy who walked me home from school every day because he was worried about me. I see the man who enlisted because he wanted to protect people. I see someone who's been through hell and is still kind enough to accept help from strangers." She turned back to him. "But I also see someone who didn't trust me enough to just come home." Word of Marcus's return spread through Cedar Falls like wildfire. The reactions were mixed. Some people were angry about the deception. Others were moved by the love story, and still others were simply grateful to have another veteran home safely. Pastor Williams visited Marcus at the small apartment he'd rented above the hardware store. "Son, I understand why you did what you did. War changes a man, makes him question everything. But love isn't about tests, it's about trust." Bill Rodriguez was more direct. "You're an idiot, son. That girl never stopped believing in you. She wore your dog tags around her neck for 2 years, kept your picture on her dresser. You think she needed to prove her love?" But it was Sarah's reaction that mattered most. For 3 days, she didn't come to see him. She worked her shifts at the diner, but when he tried to approach her, she politely but firmly asked him to leave. "I need time," she told him. "I need to figure out what this means." Marcus understood. He'd tested her love, but in doing so, he'd also tested her trust. And trust, once broken, was harder to rebuild than love. A week later, Marcus was walking past the diner when he heard shouting. Through the window, he saw Tyler Morrison and his friends again, this time confronting Sarah about him. "You knew all along, didn't you?" Tyler accused. "You were in on this whole fake homeless thing, making us all look like fools." "I didn't know," Sarah said firmly. "And even if I had, what you did was wrong." "Wrong? What's wrong is lying to a whole town. What's wrong is some army boy thinking he can play games with people's emotions." Marcus pushed through the door, his protective instincts overriding his desire to stay away. "That's enough." Tyler spun around, his face red with anger. Well, the hero returns. You think you're pretty smart, don't you? Making us all dance to your tune." "I think you need to leave," Marcus said quietly. "Or what? You'll hurt me? Show everyone what that war really taught you?" The challenge hung in the air. Marcus felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the muscle memory of combat. But then he looked at Sarah, saw the fear in her eyes. Not fear of Tyler, but fear of what Marcus might do. And in that moment, he made a different choice. "You're right," Marcus said, his voice steady. "The war did teach me something. It taught me that violence is easy, that hurting people is simple, that destroying things takes no skill at all." He stepped closer to Tyler, who took an instinctive step back. "But building something? Protecting something? Loving something? That's hard. That takes courage." Tyler's bravado was crumbling. I don't... "You don't know what you're talking about," Marcus finished, "and that's okay. I hope you never have to learn the hard way." He turned to Sarah. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the test, for the lies, for not trusting you. I'm sorry for letting fear make me cruel." Sarah stepped forward, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Marcus, I thought I needed to know if you could love me at my worst," he continued, "but what I really needed to know was if I could trust you with my heart, and I should have known that the day I left. You've been proving it every day since." Tyler and his friends slipped out quietly, the drama no longer entertaining when it became about real emotion, real pain, real love. 6 months later, Cedar Falls held its annual Veterans Day ceremony. Marcus stood on the platform in his dress uniform, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. He'd been asked to speak about his service, his return, his recovery. "Coming home from war isn't easy," he told the crowd. "You carry pieces of the battlefield with you. But what I learned is that healing isn't about forgetting where you've been. It's about finding people who'll help you figure out where you're going." In the front row, Sarah sat with Bill Rodriguez, Pastor Williams, and even Tyler Morrison, who'd become an unexpected ally in Marcus's recovery. The boy had apologized weeks ago, had even started volunteering at the VA hospital in Des Moines. "I tested someone's love," Marcus continued, "when I should have trusted it. I disguised myself as someone broken when I should have admitted I was healing. I pretended to be a stranger when I should have come home as myself." After the ceremony, Marcus and Sarah walked through the town square, past the diner where their new beginning had started with old wounds. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked. "The test?" Marcus considered the question. "I regret the pain it caused, but I don't regret learning who you really are, who we both are." They stopped at the bench where they'd shared their first kiss as teenagers. The same bench where, 3 months ago, Marcus had finally asked Sarah to marry him, not as a test, but as a promise. "Who are we then?" Sarah asked, settling beside him. Marcus looked around at the town that had welcomed him home, at the woman who'd loved him before she knew who he was, at the life they were building together one honest day at a time. "We're people who've learned that love isn't about tests," he said. "It's about truth. And truth isn't always pretty, but it's always worth fighting for." As the sun set over Cedar Falls, Marcus Chen was finally, truly home. Not because he'd passed some test, but because he'd learned to trust in something bigger than his fears. He'd learned to trust in love, the kind that doesn't need to be proven, only lived. The mailman's footsteps echoed along the cobbled sidewalk of Maple Street as he slid a small, weathered envelope into the mailbox at 1429. It bore no stamp, no return address, just a name written in careful block letters, Sarah Mitchell. Inside the diner, Sarah wiped down the last table, the lunch crowd finally thinning. She moved slower these days, not from age, but from the weight of all she'd carried. Forgiveness was never instant, she'd told Marcus, and it wasn't. But time had worked its soft magic on the cracks he'd left. Later that evening, as she returned to her apartment above the bookstore, she noticed the letter. She recognized the handwriting instantly. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "Dear Sarah, I wrote you 100 times in my head, in foxholes, in hospital beds, on flights back home that never felt like home, but I never sent a word because shame is a heavy pen. You deserved better than silence. You deserved a man whole enough to say, 'I'm scared,' instead of pretending to be someone else. That test, I thought it would prove something, but all it did was reveal that I was the one hiding. You passed, Sarah. You passed with compassion, with grace, with that stubborn kindness that used to make me laugh and now makes me cry. I failed, and I know it. But I'm trying to be worthy again, not of your love, you already gave me that, but of your trust. If you ever wonder why I waited at that booth, why I sat under that diner's flickering light for 7 days, it wasn't to trick you. It was because I couldn't walk through that door as me, not yet. Love always, Marcus." Sarah folded the letter slowly, pressing it to her chest. Her tears fell softly, not from pain this time, but release, the kind that comes when someone finally says what you've waited years to hear. 6 months had passed. Cedar Falls had entered spring, and with it came a new kind of quiet between Marcus and Sarah. Not the tense silence of regret, but the comfortable kind that only forgiveness can plant. The diner bustled with regulars, but Marcus wasn't at his usual booth. Instead, He stood outside the Methodist church, nervously adjusting the sleeves of his neatly pressed shirt. He wasn't in uniform. This time, he wanted to be just a man, not a soldier. Inside, sunlight poured through stained glass windows. Pastor Williams gave the pulpit to a guest speaker without ceremony. Marcus walked slowly to the front, the hush in the room almost holy. I used to think coming home meant stepping off a plane, but I was wrong. Coming home means walking through fear. It means letting someone love you before you think you deserve it. His eyes found Sarah's in the second pew. She smiled, just slightly. It steadied him. This town gave me more than a second chance. It gave me a mirror, and in it I saw what war had taken, but I also saw what kindness could restore. He paused, then added quietly, "And today, I'd like to ask one more question. Not a test, a truth." He stepped down from the podium, walked to the end of the aisle, and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Gasps echoed. Sarah covered her mouth. "Not for what we were," he said, kneeling, "but for what we can be. Will you build a future with me?" Tears shimmered in her eyes as she stepped forward and knelt with him. "Yes," she whispered. "Not because you tested me, but because I choose you. Every day. Just like you chose to come home." Outside, the bells rang softly, and inside that small church in Cedar Falls, two people who had once lost everything began again, not as broken souls, but as builders of something whole.